The ripple effects from Russia keep coming. Take a look at the price of nickel spiking to a record high on, well, supply risks stemming from Russia. One of the most extreme moves ever, really, in the metals market. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Deaux, who covers metals and, of course, agriculture for us. And, Joe, I'm hoping that you can maybe step back and explain some of the biggest moves in the markets, because I'm looking at the GLCO screen, and year to date, everything is maybe high double digits, even triple digits, when you're thinking about the percent gains that we've seen this year alone.
I mean, let's just start with nickel. I've covered nickel now for 7 years. I've just never seen anything like this. You had at one point nickel rise by 90% just today. We saw a number of people in the market. There were just no sellers, virtually no sellers. This is a classic short squeeze. Fundamentally, it's unbelievable. I mean, Russia accounts for about 6% of global nickel supplies, right? So even if you assume, suddenly you can't get Russian nickel, I mean, it's not 50% of the market, but we are seeing people worried about this. Now, 70% of nickel goes into stainless steel. But EVs are a big deal, right? About 6% of nickel right now goes into EVs, and that's very high-grade nickel. Now, the largest supplier of this high-grade nickel is a Russian company, Norilsk Nickel. They provide about 16% of global supply. So you obviously have a lot of people worried on that front, especially with the EV story getting bigger and bigger. Yeah. And obviously Russia just, sitting there and nobody knows what they can do with any supply from the nation.
When you look at nickel, you look at some of the other metals and the other minerals out there coming out of Russia and that region writ large here. Is it safe to say that a big part of the reason why the world is so dependent on some of those nations is because the other nations not only don't have the resources, but don't necessarily, want to mine those resources in the way that some of those other countries are willing to do?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is, right, Russia's just a major supplier, right? Indonesia is the world's largest, and Indonesia has been the story in the nickel market for basically the past decade plus. The question had always been, well, how much will they actually mine? How much can actually be refined inside the borders of Indonesia and outside the borders? I mean, that used to be the conversation, but now the conversation is completely focused on Russia and the fact that you may just have no supply that you can get out of the country. I mean, let's take a step back here. We don't know for certain, right? There have been no sanctions taken against Russian nickel providers, but I think a lot of the market is worried that as we see sanctions build up and more going on with trading within Russia and with Russia, that is a major concern.
Move to commodities, soft commodities briefly, because what's so interesting is some of the limitations that have been put on, say, US and Latin American exports into Europe. They didn't like herbicides. They wanted to go more organic. They didn't like some of the use of, genetically modified products. That's also going to have to ease, it would seem.
Yeah, and we're already starting to see some of that come through. There was an announcement by Spain earlier saying something to the effect of, they'll have to reconsider this. I mean, the wheat price is another one that we've been, if it weren't for nickel today, we'd still be talking about wheat, right? I mean, wheat was up 41% last week. Yeah. It again hit its limit up. I mean, China is showing that their growth of wheat is actually not going to be a good crop this year. We have U.S. farmers worried about drought. Yeah. I mean, Russia, Ukraine accounts for a quarter of wheat traded in the world.